For weeks ago, my fiancé of 2 years called off our wedding 3 days before it was supposed to happen because his ex-girlfriend contacted him claiming she was pregnant with his child. Last week, I found out she made the whole thing up just to destroy our relationship. Now my ex-fiancé is begging me to take him back, but honestly, I'm not sure I can ever forgive him for choosing to believe her over me. I'm 29F, and my ex-fiancé Mark is 31M. We've been together for 3 years and got engaged 2 years ago. Our relationship has always been solid. We communicate well, rarely fight, and have the same goals for the future. I genuinely thought Mark was the person I was going to spend my life with. Mark dated his ex-girlfriend Amanda for about 4 years before we got together. According to Mark, their relationship was really toxic and on and off for most of that time. Amanda apparently had a lot of drama in her life and would create problems when things were going too well between them. They broke up for the final time about 6 months before Mark and I started dating. Mark always said he was relieved to be done with that relationship, and that being with me showed him what a healthy partnership could actually look like. Amanda tried to contact Mark a few times during our first year together, but he always shut it down immediately. He'd show me the messages, and then block her on whatever platform she was using. I appreciated his transparency, and never felt threatened by her attempts to reach out. After that first year, Amanda seemed to give up trying to contact Mark. We never heard from her again, and honestly, I forgot she existed most of the time. Mark and I got engaged after dating for a year. The proposal was perfect, and we both felt ready to take that next step. We decided on a long engagement because we wanted to save money for a nice wedding and a house down payment. Planning our wedding was actually really fun. We both wanted something classic but not too formal with about 150 guests. We found a beautiful venue, booked our vendors, and everything was coming together perfectly. Our wedding was scheduled for a Saturday in early February. By the Wednesday before, I was feeling excited but also overwhelmed with all the last-minute details. Mark had taken the week off work to help with final preparations, and we'd been running around all week handling vendor confirmations and setup logistics. Wednesday afternoon, Mark and I were at the venue doing a final walkthrough with our coordinator when his phone started ringing. He glanced at it and said it was an unknown number, so he let it go to voicemail. About an hour later, when we were driving home, Mark checked his voicemail. I watched his face change as he listened to the message. He went completely pale and asked me to pull over so he could call the number back. Mark stepped out of the car to make the call, and I could see him through the windshield getting increasingly agitated. He was pacing and running his hands through his hair, which he only does when he's really stressed. When he got back in the car, Mark told me that Amanda had called. She claimed she needed to talk to him urgently about something important, and that it couldn't wait until after our wedding. I asked Mark what he thought she wanted, and he said he had no idea, but that her voice sounded really shaky and desperate on the voicemail. Against my better judgment, I told him he should probably call her back just to get it over with, so we could focus on our wedding. Mark called Amanda that evening while I was in the shower. When I came out, he was sitting on our bed looking absolutely devastated. Amanda had told him she was pregnant and that he was the father. According to Amanda, they had slept together about 2 months ago when she'd reached out to him claiming she needed closure from their relationship. She said she'd been trying to work up the courage to tell him about the pregnancy, but when she saw our wedding announcements on social media, she realized she couldn't let him get married without knowing he was going to be a father. I was completely shocked. Mark and I had been together continuously for 3 years, and he'd never mentioned anything about meeting up with Amanda or needing closure from that relationship. Mark swore to me that he had never cheated on me and that he had no memory of being with Amanda 2 months ago. He seemed genuinely confused and kept saying that none of this made sense. But Amanda had apparently provided specific details about their encounter, what Mark was wearing, where they met, things they talked about. She also knew details about Mark's current life that she wouldn't have known unless they'd had recent contact. Mark was completely torn apart by the whole situation. He kept saying he couldn't understand how this could have happened because he would never cheat on me. I suggested that maybe Amanda was lying, but Mark said the details she provided were too specific for her to have made them up. Plus, why would she lie about something that could be easily proven with a paternity test? We stayed up until 3 a.m. talking through the situation. Mark was adamant that he had never intentionally cheated on me, but he couldn't explain Amanda's pregnancy or her knowledge of his recent activities. The only thing Mark could think of was that maybe he'd been really drunk one night and had blacked out. He said there was one evening about 2 months ago when he'd gone out with coworkers and had come home really late and hungover, but he thought he'd just had too much to drink at the work happy hour. I asked Mark if he thought it was possible that Amanda had somehow orchestrated a situation where he was too drunk to remember what happened. Mark said he didn't want to accuse Amanda of something that's serious without proof, but that he honestly couldn't remember anything about that night after leaving the office party. Thursday morning, Mark called Amanda back to demand more information about their alleged encounter. Amanda gave him even more specific details and said she was about 8 weeks pregnant based on when they'd been together. She also sent Mark a photo of a positive pregnancy test with a piece of paper showing the current date. Mark was convinced that the pregnancy was real, even if he couldn't remember how it had happened. He said that regardless of the circumstances, if Amanda was carrying his child, he couldn't just ignore that responsibility. I understood Mark's position logically, but emotionally I was devastated. Our wedding was in 2 days, and suddenly everything was falling apart because of his ex-girlfriend's claims. Mark and I spent Thursday trying to figure out what to do. He wanted to postpone the wedding until we could get a paternity test done and figure out the truth about what had happened with Amanda. I was torn between wanting to support Mark through this crisis and feeling completely betrayed by the possibility that he'd cheated on me, even if he couldn't remember it. By Thursday evening, we decided we had to postpone the wedding. Mark said he couldn't in good conscience marry me while this situation was unresolved, and I agreed that we needed answers before we could move forward. Friday morning, Mark called all our vendors and guests to let them know the wedding was postponed due to a family emergency. Most people were understanding, though we lost some deposits and had to deal with a lot of questions from confused relatives. I spent Friday at my parents' house, trying to process everything that had happened. My mom was furious with Mark for putting me through this so close to our wedding, but my dad said that if Mark really couldn't remember what had happened, postponing was probably the right thing to do. Mark scheduled a paternity test for the following week, which meant we'd have to wait about 10 days for results. Update: 2 weeks later. The paternity test results came back negative. Mark is not the father of Amanda's baby. But here's where things get really messed up. When Mark called Amanda to tell her about the test results, she claimed that she'd miscarried the day after he took the test. Amanda said the stress of the situation and Mark's hostile reaction to her pregnancy announcement had caused her to lose the baby. She started crying and saying that Mark was responsible for making her so upset that she couldn't carry the pregnancy to term. Mark felt terrible about Amanda's alleged miscarriage, even though the paternity test had proven the baby wasn't his. He said he felt guilty for putting her through the stress of the test when she was already in a difficult situation. I was getting really suspicious of Amanda's story at this point. The timing of her supposed miscarriage, happening right after the paternity test proved Mark wasn't the father, seemed way too convenient. I convinced Mark to ask Amanda for medical records from her miscarriage, just so we could have documentation of what had happened for our own peace of mind. Amanda got really defensive when Mark asked for proof of the miscarriage. She said it was traumatic enough to go through without having to prove it to people who didn't believe her. That's when Mark started getting suspicious too. He pointed out that Amanda had been willing to provide photos of pregnancy tests, but couldn't provide any documentation of her medical care. Mark did some investigating and found out that Amanda had never been to any of the local hospitals or clinics during the time frame when she claimed to have had the miscarriage. Update: 3 weeks later. We caught Amanda in her lie. Mark's friend Jake works at the same company as Amanda, and Mark asked him to casually find out if Amanda had been acting pregnant or taking any time off for medical appointments. According to Jake, Amanda had never mentioned being pregnant to anyone at work and had been drinking alcohol at several company events during the time when she claimed to be pregnant. Jake also said that Amanda had been talking about Mark's upcoming wedding for weeks before she contacted him. She'd been asking their mutual coworkers questions about Mark's relationship and had seemed really interested in details about our wedding plans. Armed with this information, Mark confronted Amanda directly. He told her he knew she'd been lying about the pregnancy and demanded to know why she'd done it. Amanda eventually broke down and admitted that she'd never been pregnant. She said she'd been following Mark on social media and couldn't stand the thought of him marrying someone else. Amanda claimed she still loved Mark and thought that if she could just break us up, he'd realize that they were meant to be together. She'd planned the fake pregnancy story to create enough drama and doubt to ruin our relationship. The positive pregnancy test photo Amanda had sent was apparently from a friend of hers who actually was pregnant. Amanda had convinced her friend to take a photo with a date card as a prank and then used it to support her lie. Amanda had also been researching Mark's social media and our mutual friends to gather the specific details that made her story seem credible. She knew about his work events and activities because she'd been essentially stalking his online presence for months. Mark was absolutely furious when he realized how elaborate Amanda's deception had been. She'd not only destroyed our wedding and caused us weeks of emotional turmoil, but she'd also manipulated him into believing he'd cheated on me when he'd actually been faithful the entire time. Update: 1 month later. Mark has been begging me to reschedule our wedding and give our relationship another chance. He's apologetic and says he understands that his decision to believe Amanda over me was hurtful, but he argues that her story was so detailed and convincing that anyone would have been fooled. I've been staying at my parents' house since everything came out, trying to figure out how I feel about the whole situation. On one hand, I understand that Amanda's lie was very sophisticated and that Mark was put in an impossible position. If someone contacted me claiming to be pregnant with my partner's child and provided convincing evidence, I'd probably want to investigate too. On the other hand, Mark chose to postpone our wedding 3 days before it was supposed to happen based on the word of his manipulative ex-girlfriend. He didn't give me the benefit of the doubt or consider that Amanda might be lying to break us up. The thing that bothers me most is that Mark seemed willing to believe that he'd cheated on me while blackout drunk rather than questioning Amanda's motives or story. Even if he couldn't remember the alleged encounter, shouldn't his first instinct have been to doubt his toxic ex-girlfriend rather than doubt his own fidelity? Mark argues that he was trying to be responsible by taking Amanda's claims seriously and that he never actually believed he'd intentionally cheated on me. He says he was just confused and trying to do the right thing in a complicated situation. But I keep thinking about our wedding day, which should have been the happiest day of our lives. Instead, I spent it crying in my childhood bedroom while our guests received cancellation calls. Update: 6 weeks later. I've decided not to get back together with Mark. After weeks of thinking about everything that happened, I realized that my trust in Mark has been fundamentally damaged. Not because I think he cheated on me, but because of how he handled the situation when Amanda came forward with her lies. The man I thought I was going to marry would have immediately been suspicious of his manipulative ex-girlfriend making dramatic claims right before our wedding. He would have insisted on getting proof before making any major decisions. He would have protected our relationship instead of being willing to blow it up based on unverified accusations. Mark's willingness to believe Amanda over me, even temporarily, showed me something about his character that I can't unsee. When things got difficult, he didn't fight for our relationship or give me the benefit of the doubt. He just accepted that the worst-case scenario might be true and acted accordingly. I also realized that Mark's guilt about Amanda's fake miscarriage revealed how much he still cares about her feelings. Even after discovering that she'd elaborately deceived us and destroyed our wedding, Mark was more concerned about Amanda's emotional well-being than about the damage she'd caused to our relationship. When I told Mark my decision, he was devastated. He said I was being unfair and that anyone could have been fooled by Amanda's deception. He accused me of punishing him for being a victim of his ex-girlfriend's manipulation. But I don't see it that way. I see it as Mark failing to protect our relationship when it mattered most. Update: 3 months later. Mark has finally accepted that our relationship is over and has stopped trying to convince me to give him another chance. I heard through mutual friends that he's been seeing a therapist to work through why he was so easily manipulated by Amanda and to understand why I couldn't forgive him for his role in what happened. As for Amanda, Mark ended up reporting her behavior to their HR department at work. Creating fake pregnancy scares and stalking former partners apparently violates their company's code of conduct. Amanda was given a formal warning and was required to attend counseling through their employee assistance program. Mark also sent Amanda a cease and desist letter telling her to stop contacting him or anyone in his life. As far as I know, she's respected that boundary so far. I've been doing my own therapy to work through the betrayal and disappointment of having my wedding destroyed by someone I'd never even met. It's been helpful to talk through my feelings about Mark's choices and to understand why his response to the situation was such a deal breaker for me. Update: 6 months later. I'm doing much better now and have started dating again. It took a while to trust my judgment about people after everything that happened with Mark and Amanda, but therapy really helped me work through those issues. I've learned to appreciate partners who are naturally protective of our relationship and who don't need to be convinced to prioritize our connection over external drama. Mark and I had to work together to cancel all our wedding vendors and divide up our shared belongings, which was awkward but civil. He's moved to a different apartment, and we don't have any contact outside of the practical stuff we needed to handle. I heard that Mark started dating someone new recently, and I hope he's learned from what happened with us. Maybe his experience with Amanda taught him something about setting boundaries with ex-partners and protecting his current relationships from outside interference. As for Amanda, I don't know what happened to her after the HR situation at work. I hope she got the help she clearly needed to deal with whatever issues led her to create such an elaborate deception. Final update: 1 year later. It's been a year since Amanda destroyed my wedding with her fake pregnancy lie, and I can honestly say I'm grateful things happened the way they did. I'm now in a relationship with someone who would never put me in the position Mark put me in. When I told my current boyfriend about what happened with Mark and Amanda, his immediate response was that Mark should have told Amanda to prove her claims before making any decisions about the wedding. My boyfriend said that if an ex-girlfriend contacted him claiming to be pregnant, his first call would be to me to discuss how we wanted to handle the situation together. He wouldn't have made unilateral decisions about our relationship based on unverified claims from someone with obvious motives to break us up. This response showed me what I should have expected from Mark: partnership, protection of our relationship, and healthy skepticism about manipulative behavior from his past. I also realized that Mark's immediate willingness to believe he might have cheated on me while drunk revealed some concerning things about his relationship with alcohol and his understanding of consent. A faithful partner wouldn't consider blackout cheating a plausible explanation for pregnancy claims from an ex. Looking back, I think Amanda actually did me a favor by exposing Mark's character before we got married. Better to find out how he handles crisis situations while we were engaged than after we'd legally bound our lives together. I heard through the grapevine that Mark and Amanda actually ended up getting back together a few months after our breakup. Apparently, Mark reached out to Amanda to get closure after our relationship ended, and they reconnected. The irony isn't lost on me that Amanda's plan to break us up and get Mark back actually worked, just not in the time frame she originally intended. Mark and Amanda deserve each other. A man who doesn't protect his relationships and a woman who destroys them make a perfect pair. The moral of the story: if your partner is willing to blow up your relationship based on unverified claims from their manipulative ex, they're not ready for marriage. Trust is about more than fidelity. It's also about having faith in your partner's character and judgment. Also, always be suspicious of dramatic pregnancy announcements that happen right before major life events. The timing is usually not a coincidence.